Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf and to another recent reads on Sunday. I haven't done one of those in a while. Most of the books that I read, I wrapped up in readathons or tops and flops, but there are a couple of leftovers, so to speak, that I want to talk to you about today. And I will try to keep this video at a reasonable length because I know that you are all watching Vlogmas and you have to watch tons of videos every day. So I don't want to burden you with another 20-minute video of recent reads. But anyway, let's get started. And the first two books I want to talk to you about are books that I read in November for Nonfiction November. You've probably all forgotten all about Nonfiction November already because you are so caught up in Christmas and the holidays and Vlogmas. But there was this event called Nonfiction November. And there were a couple of prompts, and one of the prompts was sport. And I really struggled to find a book to read because I'm not that much into sport. But then I saw Doris over at All the Books. Please check out her channel. If you've not subscribed yet, you don't know what you're missing. Talking about Elizabeth Lett's book, The $80 Champion, first published in 2011. And as you can probably guess from the cover, it's about a horse. And yes, I did horse riding when I was a teenager for many, many years, and I loved it. I conform to the stereotype once in a while. But anyway, so this is the story about a Dutch immigrant, Harry de Leyer, who came to the United States after the Second World War. Harry de Leyer was a horseman. His father back in Holland had a farm, and when Harry and his young wife moved to the US, he started working as a teacher, horse riding teacher, and slowly built up his own horse riding farm. And in 1956, when he had just been living in the US for a couple of years, he went to an auction to buy a horse for his riding school. But he had car trouble, he was late, and so the only horses, when he finally got to the auction, the auction was over, and the only horses left were those that nobody wanted and that were sent off to the slaughterhouse. But there was one gray-white horse in particular that caught his attention, and he bought it for $80. His children subsequently dubbed the horse Snowman, and this is not a spoiler, you know the title. 2 years later, he won a big national jumping championship with Snowman. So this is the story about Harry de Leyer and his horse. In other words, if you're not into horses, there's a lot of description of horses, of learning how to ride, of jumping and how that works, of various competitions until up to the 1958 championship. If you're not interested in that, don't read the book because you will be bored to death. But I loved it. I thought it was a delightful story, really well told, and I could relate to the riding stories because I did horse riding myself. So I just loved it. And it was the perfect book for this prompt. So thank you, Doris. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Elizabeth Letts is an American author, a Texan author. She lives in Houston. She writes fiction and nonfiction. And she wrote another nonfiction book about horses, The Perfect Horse, about horses captured by the Nazis. Anyway, and there's also a movie made of Harry de Leyer and Snowman, and it's on Netflix, and I will leave a link to the trailer down below. And the second book, Nonfiction November book, is the book that I read for the prompt design, and I sort of tweaked this prompt a little, grand design. So I read a book about religion, and that was Karen Armstrong's book, The Battle for God, first published in 2000, and I read this as a buddy read together with Lukash over at Totally Pretentious. Karen Armstrong is a British scholar, mainly religion and comparative religion. And if you're following my channel, you might remember that last month I read her memoir, The Spiral Staircase, which I really, really loved. I can highly recommend. I read a couple of books by her, and The Battle for God is about the rise of fundamentalism and how that works in the three main monotheistic religions, so Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And Karen Armstrong tells us the story about fundamentalism from the late Middle Ages to the present. And I thought it was really interesting, and Karen Armstrong writes so well about this subject. Sometimes I thought it was a little bit too detailed for me. All these various scholars or priests that played a role from the Middle Ages to the present. But overall, I thought it was an excellent book. So if you are interested in that subject, I can certainly recommend it. One thing I have to say, the book, as I said, was published in 2000. So she didn't include anything about our modern encounters with fundamentalism, for instance, 9/11. But the book is absolutely still worthwhile if you're interested in that topic. On to fiction. And the first book I want to talk to you about is Skane Island by Elijah Whitley, a book that I presented in a book hall a couple of weeks back. It was published earlier, but it was republished in 2015. Elijah Whitley is a British author, and I had already trepidations when I hauled the book, if you watch that book haul, because she mainly writes sort of horror, fantasy, kind of magical realism books. And I have to say up front, it turned out that it's a good book if you are into that, but it was just not quite my cup of tea. The story of Skane Island is there is this island, Skane Island, off the British coast, a couple of miles off the British coast, which is a sort of refuge for women. You can only go there if you are invited by the administration, let me put it without any spoilers, by the administration of women of the island, and then you go there for a couple of weeks. All is provided for, so board and food and everything, and the only thing you have to do is you have to write a story about your life for the island's library. The book opens with our main character, Marianne, who has quite an unpleasant experience and gets an invitation to this island, which is surprising to her, even though she knows that her mother had been invited to the island and had gone there many, many years back, decades back, and vanished after that. Marianne then goes to the island to investigate, mainly because she hopes that she will find her mother's declaration in the library and maybe find clues about what happened to her mother. The book is told from various perspectives, Marianne and her husband's perspective, and then over the course of the book we learn the secret, quote unquote, of the island and what happened to the mother. And if I tell you that, the story sounds good, and it does sound good, but it was just not, I can't say anything else than that it was not my cup of tea, and my phone is ringing like crazy because I'm not paying attention to a text I get. I will do that now. And the last book I want to talk to you about in this recent reads is a debut novel, Laura Prescott, The Secrets We Kept, published earlier this year. Laura Prescott is an American author. She went to an MFA program, of course, like all good American authors do. She worked as a political consultant. And this book is called a spy novel. It's set in the Cold War, in the 1950s and 60s, and we follow a group of women. The book is told from various perspectives, a group of women who work officially as secretaries or receptionists at the CIA, when it was at Langley, when it was still in the capital. But after work, these women also do spy work. And the spy work that the book is centering around is Boris Pasternak's novel, Dr. Zhivago. So we also get his perspective and the perspective of his mistress, Olga. Boris Pasternak wrote this book during the 50s, over the course of many, many years. And when it was finished, it was not allowed to be published in the Soviet Union because it was critical, at least that's how it was perceived, it was too critical about the revolution and the Soviet state. So the aim of the CIA and other Secret Service organizations was to smuggle the manuscript out of the Soviet Union and publish it. The book is not, let me say that right from the start, is not your typical spy novel. There is some, spy action. We see how these women are trained and how it works with the secret drops and things like that. But it's much more centering around the characters of a couple of women working for the CIA, and especially Olga and Boris Pasternak. Olga, who was sent to the Gulag and then came back, and how she and her lover lived during that time in the Soviet Union, but also about this manuscript and whether it's a good idea to give it to a foreign country in order to be published, that kind of thing. And I loved it. I loved that atmosphere. It also helped that the Italian publisher who first publishes the book, Dr. Zhivago, in Italian, is Feltrinelli. And I read a biography about him, which is called Senior Service, because Feltrinelli was heavily involved in politics, in communism, and he was killed when he was quite young. So all these kind of things that I was already interested in came together in this book. But I know that a lot of readers who I think expected a different kind of book, a more, the spy who came in from the cold kind of typical spy novel, and it isn't. It really focuses on the lives of these women mainly, and we learn a lot about how difficult it was, for instance, in the CIA for a woman in the 1950s to get any kind of real job there, except for secretaries, how chauvinistic the atmosphere was there. So that was interesting to me, and the story gripped me. So I recommend the book with the caution that it's more a character-based book about various women in various countries and not your typical spy novel. Anyway, so these were my recent reads, and I kept, as promised, the video fairly short, at least for me. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. And as always, please talk to me down in the comments. I'm looking forward to that. And I'll see you all soon in the next one. Bye-bye.